Welcome to 'Tis the Soundtrack, the podcast dedicated to digging deep and bringing you the merriest of music all year long. I'm your host, Kevin Williams, and today we're putting on our finest boots, grabbing our best Stetson hat, and taking a stroll down the promenade to the Westward Ho Trading Company to get in a little early holiday shopping. And on our way, we might just hear some of the local fiddle and banjo players practicing for the upcoming Christmas concert down at the Golden Horseshoe. This is the latest in our Disney Holiday Loop series. This is Frontierland. If you're not familiar with Disney area loops or their holiday counterparts, you can check out the first entry in the series, where we dive into the concept and also take a look at the big band, jazz, and swing Christmas tunes of the Buena Vista Street area in Disney California Adventure. But today, we're experiencing the story of our country's past, the color, romance, and drama of frontier America, as it developed from wilderness trails to roads, riverboats, railroads, and civilization, a tribute to the faith, courage, ingenuity, and holiday merriment of our hardy pioneers who blazed the trails and made this progress possible. That description of Frontierland, and overly rosy view of America's push westward, came from Walt Disney himself, on July 17, 1955, Disneyland's opening day. Well, except the holiday merriment part, I added that. Frontierland, along with Adventureland, Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, and Main Street USA, made up the 5 original opening day areas of Walt's original park. And while it depicts a western town frozen in the mid-19th century, Frontierland has seen its share of changes over the last 70 years, not just to the attractions, restaurants, and shops, but to its geography as well. On opening day, Frontierland occupied the most real estate inside the berm. That's the built-up barrier around Disneyland that separates the magic inside from the city outside, or the orange groves as it was back in the 1950s. In those early years, Frontierland was all about kinetic energy and movement. By the end of the decade, you could not only mosey down the streets of Frontierland, but take a mine train through the Rainbow Caverns, and ride stagecoaches, covered wagons, and even live pack mules around the living desert. The rivers of America bustled with keelboats, rafts, and canoes, while the Mark Twain and sailing ship Columbia looped the waters. Frontierland first began to change in the early 1960s. The overly tippy stagecoaches were the first to be retired. Shortly after, the living desert area was transformed into nature's wonderland and expanded to include new biomes, like Cascade Peak and Beaver Valley. The Rainbow Caverns mine train now traveled the entire expanse as the newly christened Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland. As the 60s progressed, Frontierland donated some of its riverfront property, as well as its railroad stop, to the park's newest land, New Orleans Square. And in the early 70s, the boundaries were again redrawn when the Indian Village area was redeveloped into Bear Country. The next major change came at the end of the 70s, when Nature's Wonderland ceded its territory, mine train, pack mules and all, to make room for Frontierland's first and still only thrill ride, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad.
Hang on to them hats and glasses, 'cause this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
At this point, Frontierland went more or less unchanged for about 30 years. Well, except for the ranch area, which spent most of that time trying to decide if it was open or closed or what movie it was promoting. And then there was the years where it was rethemed to host the Hunchback of Notre Dame's Festival of Fools. But we're getting sidetracked. The next and most recent round of changes came about a decade ago, when Big Thunder Ranch left Frontierland altogether, and Tom Sawyer Island, the Rivers of America, and the Disneyland Railroad route were all trimmed down or reshaped to make room for the park's newest area, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. And though the footprint of Frontierland has continued to shift and shrink over the decades, the music heard throughout the area has grown and diversified. In addition to what we would call the main loop, the one that plays along the promenade and in front of the shops, several other unique loops can be heard throughout the land. The Big Thunder Mountain Queue, the Mark Twain Riverboat, the sailing ship Columbia, the Stockade area, that's the area with the fort when you enter Frontierland from the hub, the Pioneer Mercantile, the Golden Horseshoe Saloon, Rancho del Zocalo, the Rivers of America, and even the area outside Lafitte's Tavern on Tom Sawyer Island, all have unique musical loops. And that doesn't even include retired attractions like the Mike Fink Keelboats or the Big Thunder Ranch, which also sported their own unique soundtracks. Frontierland doesn't slouch when it comes to the holiday music either. In addition to the holiday version of the main loop heard throughout the land, there are separate, distinct loops inside the Pioneer Mercantile and along the rivers of America. And with that, we'll end our brief history of Frontierland and jump right into the music. But if you're interested in a deeper dive of Frontierland's history and how it's changed over the years, there are many great podcast episodes by far greater podcasters who have done a fantastic job covering this topic. I'll link to a few of my favorites in the show notes. Frontierland's earliest musical loops were comprised of old country folk songs. They were inexpensive to license, instrumental pieces featuring a lot of banjos, fiddles, and saloon pianos. This type of music was used up until the early 90s, when the main loop shifted to feature songs from popular Western TV shows and movies. You could hear the theme songs to Wagon Train, Bonanza, High Noon, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly throughout Frontierland from 1992 to 2011. The loop also included music from less conventional Western movies, like City Slickers and Back to the Future 3. The theme song to Blazing Saddles was even featured on the loop during this time.
He rode a blazing saddle, he wore a shining star. His job to offer battle to bad men.
The current main loop, which has been playing since 2012, is a pivot away from the previous Hollywood-heavy soundtrack and back to a more classic country sound. It's comprised almost entirely from two albums, Memories of the Old West and Legends of the Old West, both by Craig Duncan and the Smoky Mountain Band. The loop includes iconic songs like Ghost Riders in the Sky, The Yellow Rose of Texas, and Don't Fence Me In. The holiday version of the main loop cuts a similar path. Nearly 2/3 of the tracks come from a single album, Christmas Remembered by Banjomania. The full holiday main loop includes Sleigh Ride by Banjomania, Silent Night by the Nashville Keyboard Section, A Rootin' Tootin' Santa Claus by Tennessee Ernie Ford, Good King Wenceslas by Banjomania, Christmas on the Plains by Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, Let It Snow by Banjomania, Silver Bells by Banjomania, Here Comes Santa Claus by Gene Autry, God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen by Banjomania, Santa Claus is Coming to Town by Banjomania, It Came Upon a Midnight Clear by the Nashville Keyboard Section, It's Beginning to Look a Lot Like Christmas by Banjomania, I Saw Three Ships by Banjomania, Christmas Carols by the Old Corral by Tex Ritter, and finally Parade of the Wooden Soldiers by, you guessed it, Banjomania. Tim Babb and I talked about this recently on his Merry Mixtape episode where he selected Banjomania's Sleigh Ride as one of his favorite Disneyland Christmas songs. Tim noted that there's something about banjos and Christmas music that just go together so well, and he's absolutely right. The entire Christmas Remembered album is fantastic. In addition to the 9 tracks featured on the holiday loop, the album also contains The Christmas Waltz, Carol of the Bells, I'll Be Home for Christmas, What Child Is This, We Wish You a Merry Christmas, and a medley of Deck the Halls, It Came Upon a Midnight Clear, and We Three Kings. It really is the perfect music for Frontierland at Christmas time. The Christmas Remembered album, which is available on cassette and CD, is getting rather hard to find, but it is available on all the major streaming platforms. It's actually pretty incredible if you think about it. Somehow, when you take a bunch of holiday banjo tracks recorded in the 1990s and pipe them through a 1950s Hollywood recreation of a mid-1800s frontier town, it evokes a sense of nostalgia, or not quite nostalgia, but whatever that sensation is that feels similar to nostalgia, but only for a place you've never visited and in a time you've never lived. Logically, we know none of these recordings belong in a mid-19th century frontier town, but emotionally, hearing the music as you pass by the shops, all dressed up in their holiday decor, it tugs at all the right strings. I guess that's why they call it Disney Magic. Before we move on, I want to take a minute to circle back to the Big Thunder Ranch. Before being annexed by Batuu, the ranch played host to Santa's Reindeer Roundup, where guests could not only meet Santa, but do some Christmas crafting and even see a live reindeer. And yes, it had its own holiday loop. The Big Thunder Ranch loop has a bit of overlap with the main Frontierland one, but instead of being packed full of Banjomania tracks, It contains a handful of Michael Martin Murphey tunes, all from his Cowboy Christmas album, as well as songs from Riders in the Sky, the Groovegrass Boys, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Oregon's own The Trail Band. And this brings me to my first idea for improving Christmas time in Frontierland. But first, a quick message for Thomas Maslam. Tom, I know you just stepped into the role of president of Disneyland Resort. You, sir, have been entrusted with carrying out the legacy of Walt's original park, and I cannot overstate how big of a job that is. No doubt you're incredibly busy right now, taking the reins from Kenny P and getting up to speed on all the goings-ons. So, I want to offer you a few quick, easy wins as you settle in. If you happen to be one of the 3 people that listen to this podcast, please pay close attention. I'm going to give you several ideas for improving Frontierland at Christmas time throughout this episode. Feel free to take any or all of these surefire ways to crank up the holiday magic at your new resort. Okay, so here's the first idea. As we've been discussing, the Frontierland holiday loop is fantastic, but it's on the shorter side of area loops at only 36 minutes. Now, if you take the 8 extra Big Thunder Ranch tracks and weave them into the main Frontierland holiday loop, that gets you another 17 minutes, punching the soundtrack out to a respectable 53. It also gives the loop a bit more variety, with several of the additional songs having a more cowboys around the campfire aesthetic. And Tom, if you're wondering what that might sound like, once it's all stitched together, don't worry. I went ahead and created my own ranch remix of the Frontierland holiday loop, where I did just that. The link to it is in the show notes.
Yodeling in the snow, a yodeling ho, 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 Christmas cowboy style.
Moving on to the next Frontierland holiday loop, we're taking a look at the video loop that plays inside the Pioneer Mercantile at Christmas time. In the back of the shop is a faux stretched hide that acts as a projector screen. During the first half of the year, it plays a loop of musical segments from Disney films and television shows. The current non-holiday version includes musical clips like Un Poco Loco from Coco, the theme from Zorro, and even Kermit performing Rainbow Connection from the Muppet Movie. That's right, everyone, there's still a teensy tiny bit of Muppets in Disneyland, and fittingly for Frontierland, that little bit includes a banjo.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows? And what's on the other side?
There are also 2 unique holiday versions of the video loop that play during the second half of the year, one for Halloween and one for Christmas. The Pioneer Mercantile Christmas loop contains Just a Toy from Babes in Toyland, Snow Snows from Winnie the Pooh, A Very Merry Pooh Year, Larry Gross performing Sleigh Ride from the Disney Family Christmas Collection, That Christmas Feeling from Phineas and Ferb Christmas Vacation, Donald Duck conducting We Wish You a Merry Christmas from Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, Ring in the Season from Olaf's Frozen Adventure, Larry Gross again with Here Comes Santa Claus, also from the Disney Family Christmas Collection, As Long as There's Christmas from Belle's Enchanted Christmas, The Best Christmas of All from Disney Very Merry Christmas Songs, Jingle Bells, also from Winnie the Pooh, A Very Merry Pooh Year, More Muppets with It Feels Like Christmas from The Muppet Christmas Carol, The 12 Days of Christmas from Disney Sing-Along Songs, The 12 Days of Christmas, When We're Together, another song from Olaf's Frozen Adventure, Make Me Look Good from Mickey's Twice Upon a Christmas, The Way We Do Navidad from Elena of Avalor, Deck the Halls, another song from Disney Sing-Along Songs, The 12 Days of Christmas, and rounding it out, What's This from The Nightmare Before Christmas. While it has some fun tracks and definitely the Christmas vibes, it just isn't really on brand for Frontierland. Now you can make the argument that it doesn't really matter, it's just a screen to occupy the smallest of guests, while their larger companions separate themselves from more of their hard-earned money. But Disney, I think you're missing another opportunity here. Tom, here is your next slam dunk idea. If I got my Christmas wish, instead of musical shorts, the Pioneer Mercantile screen would show the Country Bear Christmas Special in its entirety, all holiday season long. For those unfamiliar, the Christmas Special was the Country Bear Holiday Overlay, last seen in Disneyland back in 2000, during the final holiday season before the attraction was reimagined into the mini adventures of Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, bother.
And while the Country Bears just received an all-new show last year in Florida, where the attraction is still going strong, their Christmas version has also been MIA since the mid-2000s. In fact, if you want to see a Country Bear Christmas show, you'll have to go all the way to Tokyo Disneyland, where the Country Bear Jingle Jamboree was just reinstated last year, after a 4-year hiatus of its own. Not only would this be a cool homage to the attraction, but it would be way more on point for Frontierland. In the latter days of the Big Thunder Ranch, Big Al, Liverlips, and the rest of the Country Bears would join musical act Billy Hill and the Hillbillies on stage to sing Christmas songs during the holidays.
I don't believe they showed up. This is a little bit awkward. I hope they didn't hear me talking about it. This swindler right here, y'all. We got Liverlips Willie. We got Shaker, and there's Big Al. Let's hear for all the bears. Dashing through the snow, there was a bush on the sleigh. O'er the fields we go, laughing all the way. There was a mountain, taking spirits bright. What fun it is to
Granted, watching a Country Bear Christmas special on a low-res projector screen isn't the same as actually experiencing the show in all its animatronic glory, but I bet people would still hang out in the Mercantile just to watch the loop. You could even add a couple of benches and use it as a vehicle to push more Country Bear merch inside the West Coast Park. Tom, I'm hoping that last part got your attention.
What is it that you do here? Merchandising.
And for our final Frontierland holiday loop, we're visiting the rivers of America and checking out the holiday loop that plays along the waterfront as you transition from Frontierland to New Orleans Square. And though the music is decidedly more at home in New Orleans, the Rivers of America is still considered a Frontierland attraction, so we're gonna count it. The standard Rivers of America loop is comprised of 17 ragtime and Dixieland jazz tunes, including 5 Banjomania tracks of its own, all plucked, pun intended, from their incredibly hard-to-find self-titled album. The holiday version is undeniably a New Orleans jazz loop, and yes, even though we've established the Rivers of America is not part of New Orleans Square, this loop actually started as the holiday music played inside the Blue Bayou restaurant before making its way outside to the waterfront in 2015. Incidentally, as of last year being 2024 for future listeners, this loop is no longer played inside the Blue Bayou at Christmas time, making it exclusive to the Rivers of America. Or at least exclusive as far as the US parks are concerned. It happens to be the same holiday loop used in Tokyo Disneyland's Royal Street area, which is the New Orleans-inspired area within Tokyo's Adventureland. The Rivers of America holiday loop contains Jingle Bells by New Birth Brass Band, Let It Snow by Magnolia Jazz Band, Silent Night by Alan Toussaint, Santa's Second Line by New Birth Brass Band, Please Come Home for Christmas by Aaron Neville, Here Comes Santa Claus by Lars Edegren and his Santa Claus Revelers, God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, also by Lars Edegren and his Santa Claus Revelers, Silver Bells by Magnolia Jazz Band, a second version of Jingle Bells, this time by Travelin' Light, I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus by Magnolia Jazz Band, Christmas in New Orleans by James Andrew, a second version of Silent Night, this time by the Dixieland Ramblers and Michael Bennett, Louisiana Christmas Day by Aaron Neville, and Winter Wonderland by Alan Toussaint. 5 of the 14 tracks in this loop come from the 1997 album Alan Toussaint and Friends, A New Orleans Christmas, which, like Banjomania's Christmas Remembered, is a fantastic album in its own right. They, along with the rest of the tracks, create a perfect New Orleans Christmas vibe, especially in the evening, as things start winding down, and you're sitting outside the River Belle Terrace, watching the Mark Twain slowly steam by. Or at least that's what I'd like to think. See, I haven't been fortunate enough to find my way to New Orleans for Christmas, so Disneyland is my West Coast substitute, which incidentally was part of the original concept for New Orleans Square, to bring the music and excitement of the French Quarter to a West Coast audience. But I'm getting sidetracked again. This does bring me to my next idea for improving Frontierland at Christmas time. The Mark Twain. I mentioned this briefly on my Merry Mixtape episode with Mr. Bab. I think Disney's missing a huge opportunity to level up the Christmas magic when it comes to the riverboat. I would love to see the Mark Twain fully decked out for the holidays. I'm talking completely festooned with garlands, wreaths, ornaments, and Christmas trees. You could even do a unique theme on each of the different decks. Then, in the evenings, get the Jambalaya Jazz Band off their tiny little raft and onto the saloon deck bandstand, to play live Christmas music for the passengers. And yes, I know this last part is not an original idea, and Disneyland does have live jazz bands from time to time perform Christmas music on the Mark Twain, but it's usually reserved for special events, like the Merriest Nights parties a few years back. I'm talking live Christmas music every night of the week on the riverboat. It would be completely next level. And I bet it would keep the Mark Twain packed well into the evening, which means you absorb some of the crowd from other areas, making them less congested and reducing the ride times a bit. So win-win-win. Or, if a live band's not in the budget, I know things can be tight, how about we just turn off the normal narration and pipe in the Rivers of America holiday loop instead while the Mark Twain makes its 14-minute trip? What do you say, Tom? And, since I'm already long into my list of Christmas time ideas, I'm going to end this episode with one more. As I mentioned at the top, Rancho del Zocalo has its own musical loop. It's a collection of instrumental Spanish guitar pieces, all taken from the album Day's End, The Soft Sounds of Spanish Guitar. In fact, the loop is just the album, played start to finish, with some very minor edits and slight tweaks to the speed of some tracks. Much like the banjos we talked about earlier, for me, there's just something about Spanish guitar and Christmas music that goes perfectly together. I would love it, Tom, if you pulled the trigger on a new holiday loop for the Rancho area, full of instrumental Spanish guitar Christmas tunes. And, before you launch into how costly it will be to get a sound engineer and source and sequence all of those tracks, don't worry. I took care of that for you too, buddy. I went ahead and made my own unofficial Rancho del Zocalo holiday loop. The link to that is also in the show notes. And with that, we'll end our look at the holiday music of Frontierland. I hope you're enjoying this series, exploring the Christmas time music of Disneyland. We have a couple more episodes in the series coming up this year, including, and I can't believe I'm going to say it, an episode looking at one of the holiday loops of that East Coast imitation, Walt Disney World. Thank you for listening to 'Tis the Soundtrack. You can find all of our past episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We don't judge, but we'd sure appreciate a like or subscribe while you're there. You can also find us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky, all under the handle @'Tis the Soundtrack. Our website is tisthesoundtrack.com, and you can get in touch with us via email at kevin@tisthesoundtrack.com. Our intro music is Krampus Workshop by that wizard of most everything audio, Kevin MacLeod. You can find him and his work at incomptech.com. All other music, songs, and snippets of audio used throughout this episode belong to their respective copyright holders and are used solely for the purpose of commentary. Links to all the music featured in this episode are available in the show notes or episode description for you folks on YouTube. Cheers, and Merry Christmas.